We're live. Hello. And we're just popping on a little bit early, as we tend to do now and then. Just to make sure, as much as it says 9 o'clock, to make sure YouTube lets us on okay, and we don't have to do lots of sudden, quick rebooting and things like that. So don't be worrying if anybody's just arriving. We'll give it a few seconds or so for people to join us at 9 o'clock. And in the meantime, I suppose thanks very much for joining us. If you're out there, say hello in the live chat there. And yeah, excuse me again, folks, if we didn't have one of our Science Fiction Friday, Science Fiction Saturday little things, as I suppose my throat has been so croaky. Excuse me. I thought it was just best, because we're doing the book club and we tend to do a fair bit of talking during that I thought it was just to save my throat. The past couple of days, really, because I've been so croaky I could barely speak, to be honest with you. So as usual, I'm on the stuff for my throat, and hopefully all go well tonight. Will not go totally hoarse. And if anybody's out there, give us a wee shout. Make sure you can hear me okay. And so tonight we're going to start with Chapter 9 of Frank Herbert's Dune series. And we've hit our 9 o'clock, so we can get rolling. And it's a Sunday. The weather's not too bad here today. It's pretty wet, but that's just standard for Northern Ireland. So Chapter 9, The Hunter's Seeker, is what I've called this chapter. And I think this is a great little chapter, and this is where our action starts to shift and our tension starts to build. And as I said, our knowledge has been increasing about the planet Arrakis. And a lot of our knowledge has been coming through the different lessons that Paul... Excuse me 1 wee second. Oh. Sorry, that's just my son coming back with the dogs there. We've been learning a fair bit through the different lessons that Paul has learned, either in hindsight, I suppose. Here come the girls. Are you behaving, big love? Did you get a walk? Sorry about that. And we've been learning, I suppose, through the process of the different tutors of Paul and the different lessons that he gets. Excuse me. Right. Hopefully, we'll get my throat going, and we'll get it going here with all doggies settled and stuff. There's Peter saying, "Water is all right in Tay for fish and things that swim in rivers." Hello, big love. You going to give me a bit of peace? What are you doing? You going to sell? Yes, indeed. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining us. It's all a bit chaotic here tonight, but we're hoping that all the doggies, they've just been walked, that they'll all settle down. Oh, dear. Water is all right in Tay for fish and things that swim in rivers. So, let's have a wee look. The epigraph, as always, we start off with an epigraph. And this one's from The Humanity of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. And we'll just have sorry, there's an awful lot of noise in the background here, folks. There we go. Hopefully it'll quieten down. I think everybody's sort of heading off to their various rooms. I think of this as the dawning of the Age of Aquarius, as Peter saying. There's all sorts of interesting things to do with that. Science fiction's a good place for that sort of thing as well. And various sort of calendars and stuff. I don't know. 21st century is not going as advertised, or maybe it is. I think. Give me a wee second, folks. I'm just going to. It's awful noisy out here. I'm just going to close my door again. Right. Oh, sorry. It's just why a lot of racket about this house tonight. I do apologise. Hopefully, we'll get settled. It's just one of those things, broadcasting from your house, isn't it? So, New Age spiritualism and all that sort of stuff, Peter. The Age of Aquarius. I don't know. Some of this stuff's quite interesting. I think it was at the Mayan calendars and so on, and precession and things like that. I think they're very interesting in terms of how mythology ties into these various clocks, if you like, calendars that we've got. But what's the song? Oh goodness. This is the dawning of the Age of Aquarius. You know that one from that's a 60s song, isn't it? I can't remember the name of the band at all, but quite like a lot of music from that period. But here we go. So, Paul's epigraph, the epigraph at the start of chapter 9 from The Humanity of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. Many have marked the speed with which Muad'Dib learned the necessities of Arrakis. The Bene Gesserit, of course, know the basis of this speed. For the other, we can say that Muad'Dib learned rapidly because his first training was in how to learn, and the first lesson of all was the basic trust that he could learn. It is shocking to find how many people do not believe they can learn, and how many more believe learning to be difficult. Muad'Dib knew that every experience carries its lesson. And again, from the humanity of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. So quite an interesting little set of statements to start off with in this epigraph. And it's really to do with the speed with which Muad'Dib learns. It's about his learning, and we're going to see that in this chapter, where essentially we get an opportunity of Paul to take all his theoretical knowledge and put it into practical use to save his own life. Really, it falls down to all the technology, everything is gone, and it falls down to his own wits, if you like. There's Chaya saying shalom, shalom Chaya, and then Peter saying Paul is leaving the age of Pisces and into an Aquarian age. It's going from boy to man and leaving Caladan to Arrakis. I suppose there's that kind of I'm starting to see what you mean. I suppose the age of Pisces, the fish, into Aquarius. I get the idea. That's quite interesting. Headboard in his bedroom. He will never really live in his. Has a Pisces motif. It does. I suppose then. I think we had a wee chat about this the other week, Peter. That the association with Pisces is in Greek mythology and Roman mythology. It is. Let me see. I think it's the goddess Aphrodite and her son Eros on the run from Zeus. I think it's meant to be, and they're turned into fish. But there's different associations with the different myths, and in particular, I suppose I was saying there, Peter, that I'm going to try and do something. Hopefully, when my throat's all good, that I'm going to do a wee sort of one night chat about. And who knows, maybe make an episode or something out of it about we were talking about the bull in mythology, and I suppose a lot of these animals have zodiacal representations all the way back to Sumeria, and the Sumerian religions and so on and so forth, which are pretty fascinating, I have to say. And so I think one of the interesting things, we haven't had a sort of planet or star turn up for a wee while, where we've kind of went and had a look at the geography of the universe, if you like, and noticed that there are particular myths with planets and stars that Herbert's working with. But not only that, what I've thought's been fascinating, Peter. There's ones like was it Arrakis itself, I think. And we not only had Roman versions of the myth, we had a Greek version of it, we had an Arabic version of it, if you see what I mean. So there's some, I think particularly enjoy finding and identifying myths and the use of sort of mythemes, if you like, in Dune. So all of this really to start with is this stuff sort of works on a level that I operate under, I suppose. It's about education. More importantly, I suppose it's about learning. And there's a separation, I think, in some things. But the first training is how to learn. It's the first thing, I suppose the point is the first thing you should learn is how to learn. And within the training, this first training was how to learn. The first lesson is the trust in yourself that you can learn, that you can do it if you go about it a certain way. And we get this carrying on. How many people believe that learning can be difficult? It's a very, very good point. Just to finish this off, every experience carries its own lesson from the humanity of Muad'Dib. What you're getting there is Frank Herbert's view on learning and education, and it's a good one, I suppose. That it's about how to learn, and I think interest, gaining people's interest in a subject is a big part of. If you want to learn something and you're interested in it, you will learn. Whether it's a hobby or directed education or anything like that. You just, you're naturally gravitate towards learning things about the things that you're interested in, and it's a truth, to be honest with you. You'll learn something that you like and that you're interested in a lot easier, and you'll have a desire to pursue that knowledge further, I think, with something that you're really into. It's as simple as that. And I'm one of these people that all my subjects that I've studied over the years, they're simply, that's the truth of it. I went and did things I was interested in, was fascinated by, and didn't really care where, if you like, the career idea took me. It was more about, I want to learn what I want to learn for me, and it works, and it's good advice. I think, if you want to learn something, just accept that if you go about it, you will, and trust that you can learn. And then it's a question of tailoring how you learn to suit yourself, I think. But every experience carries its own lesson. It's good life advice, really, isn't it? And it's very, very true. And not everything that bad happens to you in life, I suppose, ends up causing you real harm. We sort of grow and learn and develop as human beings out of the bad things, I suppose, as well as the good things. But it's an interesting little point. As I said, it's very much, when you hear Frank Herbert talking his background, if you look into it, he attended a university but didn't finish his degree. Took various courses, and he's supposed to have taught at one, I suppose, as well, sort of general studies, whatever that may be. But he's a person who goes about learning about certain things. I suppose his mode is almost journalistic, but he researches the heck out of stuff. As you can see in Dune, it has many, many disparate subjects that certainly would have been outside of his purview before he started sort of training and educating and learning all about this stuff. As Frank Herbert's put over 5 years of research into the first Dune novel, and it shows, I think. So we start off really with this. We've been in this. Once we come out of this, the epigraph, we start off in the scene from this connecting room that we were in the previous chapter, where Paul's been sleeping, or supposed to be sleeping. And we find out that this isn't the case. And we do have a little jutter back in time here, almost, if you want. And it allows some of the action that occurs here to line up with the action that we've previously seen with Dr. Yui and Jessica. And of course, we're again in these chapters, as we go through, we're going to get the scene set up for us by Herbert. He's going to work his little bit of mise en scene. And then we're going to have a sort of, I suppose the action is quite different in this chapter. And then we're going to have another two-person interaction where we're going to learn quite a bit. And this is going to be, previously we'd seen Jessica interacting with Mapes. We're going to see Paul interacting with Mapes here. But this is a great wee chapter. I said and it starts off with Paul feigning sleep, and basically what I've called Paul's deception. And as the omniscient narrator in the previous chapter presented to us, the reader, that Paul was asleep. Excuse me. And let me just double check that before we go any further. But Jessica, let me just see what it actually says. Are we told he's asleep? Stared at her son, seeing the oval shape of face so like her own. The hair, blah, blah. Jessica smiled, feeling her tears. She was suddenly caught with the idea of blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we just made that assumption that he is fully asleep, I suppose. But he's not asleep. And so as Jessica has opened up the door to look in on him, he's deceiving her. And it's another thing with Paul. I suppose that the action in the book really begins with them checking and peering in at him, and he pretends to be asleep again. I think it's part of his caution. Let's see. So what we learn here is that he's feigning sleep. He's palmed the sleeping tablet, which was easy, no bother. He's pretended to swallow it, and that's Dr. Yui tricked, basically. The fact that his mother has popped in, he's kept up the feign, and he suppresses a laugh as well. His mother had believed him asleep. So the fact that he's tricking both the adults in the previous room, I suppose. And I've just made a wee note that as much as he's sat here to sort of hop off and explore all on his own, that he's still a typical teenager at this point in many ways. Though of course we're going to find out he is exceptional. And I've just put here a little loophole. The way he comes up with it is if I slip out, we get a little bit of his thought process without asking, then I haven't disobeyed orders, and I will stay in the house where it's safe. So, in terms of what he's been told to do, I suppose his obedience up to a point is there, but he's I've the instructions are a certain thing, if you like, and there's a loophole in it. If I slip out without asking, I haven't done anything wrong. There's no disobedience, providing he stays in the house and stays safe. So this is his mindset and his deception. It's okay. I don't think there's any real harm. Excuse me. And as I said, it gives at this point, this little loophole in his mind, it gives us a little step back in time where we fall back to the discussion between Paul and Yui, which we've encountered in the previous chapter. So as much as he can't really hear what they're saying, he just he picks out a couple of words: spice, Harkonnen, etc. We already have been party to that conversation. So we've got a wee bit of knowledge that Paul doesn't have. And there's a few wee things in here that's going to allow us to sort of get a little bit of dramatic irony within the story, I suppose. And particularly that goes hand in hand with the tension in this chapter. Excuse me. So we come to this carved headboard of the bed, and it grabs his attention. There's something I was going to say there before we get to it. Yeah, very quickly, and I must scribble this down in my wee book here. The loophole is a thing to do with heroes, if you like. And let me put. Oh goodness, my ink pens I've bought new ink for my pens, and none of them are working. And I can't just get the ink to flow vertically at all. I'd love to phone up Parker Pens and ask them what the hell. Excuse me. Right, the hero. Geese taboo. So a thing that's common with heroes is that, and it's a common thing, I suppose, in mythical literature and fiction of a certain type, is that we often have within the heroic tradition something that the hero is not allowed to do, a taboo. Geese is the word in Irish. Some sort of thing that basically goes against. Often within Greek mythology, it tends to work on a hubris is the thing, and it's associated with the hero, and it's what Shakespeare would call the fatal flaw, if you like. But there's often things that are set aside, and these consequences they create a certain thing, and there's a loophole to it. So, for example, in Macbeth. Macbeth cannot be killed by someone born of woman. And of course we get, oh goodness, who is it? Oh, Macbeth's been a while. Fianna Fife, he had a wife. Of course the chap, sorry, my memory's away with it tonight, but the chap who kills him, of course, isn't born of woman. He's born of cesarean section, if you like. So it's a loophole. And it's and I quite enjoy these, by the way. This is a little one. He's found a loophole here. But it's a thing that's common with heroes, and it can often be associated with either a boon or their destruction. I think Cuchulain's one is that he's not allowed to eat dog meat. But he's also, I think he's not allowed to refuse a meal at a crossroads, and that's how I think he's got, if you like, that someone serves him dog at a crossroads. It's a way of punching the loophole. But it's just a wee thing I wanted to point out, and we'll see if we can have a wee chat about a few specific ones. My favorite one is the kind of the guy who, the holy warrior who's brought out for the battle the day before, and they bring the magic, the wise man, the seer, the prophet, whatever, and casts spells, etc., upon him, and tells him that he cannot die in battle the next day. And he charges into battle and gets shot 4 times with arrows, and basically takes him to the end of the day to bleed to death. But he can't die. Those kind of things. So sorry, just wanted to point out that finding the loophole, it's a little thing here, but it can often be a thing of great peril or boon for a hero. Ooh, that's lemony. Peter Zidek says, Peter says, Villeneuve used this scene to have Paul watching the video reels and impart a world-building narrative. Trying to remember if Lynch also had him watching lectures. There's a wee film book in the Lynch version that kind of has a few of the things, I suppose. The wee lessons, you know. China says, the headboard on desert planet carved with fish, yet they all fish out of water on Arrakis. The headboard was there, didn't come with them. Yeah, and we know about this, that there's an obvious enticement for Paul. So it's meant to grab his attention. We're told it's a false headboard attached to the wall, and inside it are concealed controls for the room. Now there's a leaping fish, salmon leap. There we go, if we know of that one. Oh, honestly, salmon leap. I'm going to put that there. There we are. I need a pen that works properly. I'm going to old Laszlo Biro will be the man there, I think. I've bought a whole pile of ink from online, and it's the proper ink for my pens, and all my ink pens will not produce vertical strokes anymore, and they're all the nibs are clean, and it's beyond me. I think it's an ink thing. I'm not sure. So all within the carving of the headboard, we have the fish's eye, which activates the suspensor lamps. There's a wave that, when twisted, is the controls for the ventilation. There's another wave that, when twisted, is the controls for the temperature. And you think, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And of course, we're talking about enticement of Paul. As Chai in the headboard on a desert planet. He's from a planet fishing, you know, a wet world, this kind of thing. And absolutely, the fish out of water metaphor, I think, works with all of the Atreides here. So we're told all this. Paul's still in bed at this point. And as he sits up, he has a wee look around the room, paints the scene for us. We see a tall, and if you think about this room and a teenage boy, there's a tall bookcase that can be opened. It's a bookcase that can be opened to reveal a closet and drawers. There's a handle on the door that is actually the thrust bar of an ornithopter. Wow, cool. Part of a sort of jet plane type thing, you know. Fish, waves, ornithopters. His favorite things, quite possibly. But in terms of if you're a teenage boy, I think, you know, a room where there's secret buttons and hidden panels, and your bookcase isn't really a bookcase. It's actually, all of these things I think would be incredibly cool. And they're sort of part and parcel of the kind of mystery machine type of, mystery castle kind of thing, secret buttons and secret compartments. And it gives it that kind of feel, if you like. Yeah, and of course we get a certain amount of dramatic irony here. Let me see. He just says, "It was as though the room had been designed to entice him." Yes, it has, and we should go. Yeah, we kind of know that already, don't we? And it's exactly what it was. Designed to entice Paul. Of all the rooms in this place, this room with its headboard, secret bookcase, panels, and all of this kind of stuff, and the ornithopter throttle on the bookcase, or handle on the door. Wow, what a cool room, amongst all goodness knows what the rest of the rooms look like. And absolutely designed to entice the young man, The salmon is the fish that can go where other fish cannot. The salmon is the Kwisatz Haderach fish archetype. Cool. Yeah, so we've got, I suppose now, I'll have a wee quick nosy, but there's the salmon of wisdom, isn't that it? Salmon of knowledge. I suppose you'll probably hit a lot of... There we go. That's amongst one. There's a big statue of it in Belfast. A creature identified in the Fenian cycle of Irish mythology, sometimes identified with Fintan MacMochra, who was known as the Wise and was once transformed into a salmon. So yeah, check that out. And I suppose there's also a particular feat known as the salmon leap, which is a heroic feat. Does Wikipedia have a thing about it? The salmon run? No, that's not it. Oh, right. I don't think the salmon leap is like a sort of special skilled combat attack for Irish heroes, and it's to do with I think it's a mighty leap in the air, while there's these kind of short stabbing spears with like many barbs on them. I think it's a gay bola, and the idea is to leap through the air while throwing the spear with your feet. I think is the salmon leap or something like that. It's a feat associated with Cuchulainn. Excuse me. But we also have the salmon of wisdom, the salmon of knowledge. And I suppose there's another association. Many, many years later, we're going to get to Leto II and his fish speakers. And of course, fish speaking is another form of divination. And so that there's lots of little motifs and all sorts. And again, the fish are quite interesting in mythology. Again, what isn't interesting in mythology, I suppose. But yeah, absolutely. And I myself was thinking, what a great headboard! Wouldn't and it wouldn't look out of place in a modern world. I think that would be quite nice. So yeah, Rocket, his own ornithopter throttles, and something that reminds him of home. And yeah, I think it's a very unusual sort of motif for it, as it's designed to entice him. And again, possibly the idea that he's feeling homesick, which I think most of the and again the Atreides they've only just landed, haven't they? Now he thought of the film book Yui had shown him. Oh, sorry, very quickly, just before we move on, it's not just the room that's designed to entice him, we're told. It's as though the room had been designed to entice him, the room and this planet. Arrakis is enticing to Paul. Mysterious. Wonderful. I don't know. I've never been out to the Middle East or Arabia or that part of the world. Sadly. And my experience, I suppose, of sort of reading literature, looking at stuff in books and online, etc. But some books really do immerse you, I think, in a particular world. And I've been enjoying reading The Thousand Nights and One Night, or as you might know it, the Arabian Nights, the Tales of the Arabian Nights, the Tales of the Thousand Night and One Night. And I've been reading them kind of one a night for quite some time. And I'm on the third of 4 volumes, and they're wonderful, and they really do. They're books that are certainly a matter of translation. If you can get as good a translation as possible, and as good an adult translation as possible, they're absolutely worth the read. And just consider them 1001 sort of short stories, if you like. Though there's not 1001 of them, but some of them are kind of just larger stories that are episodic. But they really do give you a sense of being in that part of the world. There's as much as they're fantastical, there's a realism to them that evokes the sounds and smells and all the foodstuffs and I suppose the climate, all sorts of things about that part of the world back then. And it's great to be transplanted to places like that, I think. And if you can't go yourself, a book can certainly do it. Yeah, so this film book, then we're told that he thinks of this film book that Yuri has shown him, and it's a very important film book. This is very important, I think, in the general scheme of things. And the film book is called Arrakis. All right. His Imperial Majesty's Desert Botanical Testing Station. Excuse me. His Imperial Majesty's Desert Botanical Plants Testing Station. So it's an old film book, and most interestingly, I mean, this is all, as we go through, we'll learn a lot more about this kind of stuff here and there. And there's some of this in the appendix to do with Pardo, I think, a little bit of it. But this is before the space, which is very interesting from an old film book. The old film book is from before the space, before the discovery of the space. And it suggests that the Imperial Majesty's, based on that chronology, the Imperial Majesty's Desert Botanical Testing Stations are on the planet of Arrakis before the discovery of the space. And that I suppose, is kind of important. It's a piece of a bigger puzzle that we're not really too sure about yet. And we've had a little bit of a hint about this when Jessica's talking about one of the true mysteries of Arrakis is about actually these wells being dug. So we get this little bunch of names that flip through Paul's mind, and with each word comes with it a picture that's imprinted by a mnemonic pulse. So it gives him a little image. I think that's quite an interesting little idea for the technology of a book. And the word imprinted, as always, is quite important in the book Dune. And things are variously imprinted upon the hero. But we've actually talked about this, the actual quotation by Frank Herbert of his desire to imprint upon you, the reader, this particular hero, which I think is interesting. So anytime you see the word imprint or imprinting or anything to do with that in Dune, I think it's worth paying attention to. And always remember that the writer of this novel is trying to do the same thing to you, which I think is fascinating. So we get a whole list of these plants and animals. And if anybody wants to take a look at all of these, if you look at my videos on the station, I think it's on the ecology chapter. It's either the one on the ecology of Arrakis, or I think it might be the one on the planetologists. But in my video, I've put up every one of these. I put up a picture for each one of them, so you can actually go to the video and get all of them and see what they all look like. So in terms of plants, we have saguaro, burrowbush, date palms. We've already had a bit about them. Sand verbena, evening primrose, barrel cactus, incense bush, smoke tree, the creosote bush. Excuse me. And of course, creosote's quite an interesting plant in terms of surviving in the desert and so on. And one we find out a little bit about. And then we go to some of we just quite a lot of plants obviously there, but we get a few of the animals mentioned: kit fox, desert hawk, and of course our little friend Muad'Dib, the kangaroo mouse. Now, simply put, what we're told about the names flitted through Paul's mind, each with a picture imprinted by the book's mnemonic pulse. Blah blah blah. Names and pictures from man's tyrannic past, and many to be found now nowhere else in the universe except here on Arrakis. And I think that's a very, very important statement. And I've written big word mystery down. Why is it important? All of these animals and plants are from Earth. Simple as that. They're plants that have been brought to Arrakis and have survived there. Animals that have been brought to Arrakis and survived there. But excuse me. But the interesting thing that we're told, they're from man's tyrannic past. In other words, from man's past on the Earth, but they're not found anywhere else except on Arrakis. Which tells us, so the mystery of the question that I've got is, where is Earth, or what's happened to Earth? Because if these animals and plants are from Earth and you can't find them anywhere else in the universe, then what's happened to Earth? And that is one of our quite intriguing mysteries, I think. And it's a subtle one within Dune. We don't really talk about Earth too much at all. Excuse me. China says it sounds like the whole planet is a testing station, rather than the desert botanical testing stations being a network of old imperial labs peppering the desert. It starts to sort of get a bit curious whenever we think about the size of the planet, I suppose. Yeah, and again, we're not really given enough. What I think as we go through it, Chaya, is that we figure out that at a certain point they discover space. And then we will follow this as we go through the story, hopefully check the thread on this. And then at some point, I mean, almost immediately after that, all of these botanical testing stations are shut down. And I suppose that the question becomes why. Um, and what have they, again, what have they got to do with the spice and worms, etc.? What's going on there? And of course, we also find out later on that they belong to the empire. They're the emperors. So we get a bit of a mystery, I suppose. Not only is where is Earth, what has happened to Earth, but later on, I suppose, why were these things closed? And I suppose what were they doing there in the first place? And that opens up all sorts of questions, in particular about the sandworms. And this is the thing that we never get answered, I suppose. And it's a logical thing that I think if Frank was going to write book 7 of Dune, it would have. He wasn't going to answer all of his mysteries. He's not that kind of author. But a couple of important ones, I think, are where did the worms come from? Or at least where's Earth in this situation? And I think both of those, I think they're related. And I think that it's possible. My own opinion would be that the sandworms destroyed the Earth, and that I think that they were created in a lab there. But the thing to remember about the sandworms that we learn is that they're a half plant, half animal hybrid, which starts to raise lots of questions and so on. And we also know that they're not native to Arrakis. So whatever's happened, and if they're not native to Arrakis, then they've been brought there, and that involves space travel, I think, which is kind of interesting. So, as we go through the book, we'll kind of put 2 and 2 together and start seeing some of these things. And since some of these wee mysteries are contained within the appendices, and if we've never really gotten into reading them or had a look at them, there are lots of little clues. I think nothing, but not everything are. They're never really answered in certain ways, but there are lots of clues that make us go, I wonder if, But that's one of my favorites, really, to think about. Where do the worms come from? I still think that no matter what, the answer has to be a laboratory, regardless of where that laboratory is. And where is Earth and what's happened to Earth? Especially with all these humans having their long genealogy and history, all the way back to the Atreides and things like this. It's fascinating. So there we go. And we get a little bit, as again, Paul tells us there's so many things to learn about, just like for us, the spice and the sandworms. And we get some sounds from the next door. And again, these kind of sounds used to break up the action in this chapter. And we get the idea that the door is closed, and he's able to sort of determine that Jessica is gone, and suspects that Dr. Yu would probably remain in the other room reading, which is kind of important, I think, for when we get along a bit. And it's kind of, right, okay. Everybody's gone and done their thing. Time for me to explore. Ha 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 ha. And again, it is that there's very much the teenager in Paul still there. So he slips out of the bed and heads over to the bookcase door. And at this point, there's a sound behind him, and he stops. Where are we? Do. Paul slipped the head for the bookcase door that opened into the closet. He stopped at a sound behind him, turned. The carved headboard of the bed was folding down onto the spot where he had been sleeping. Paul froze, and immobility saved his life. So he stops, and it's, again, caution, which is a major trait of Paul Atreides at the beginning. He's cautious. He stops, and he doesn't move, and it saves his life. I think it's quite interesting that the headboard comes down on where he was sleeping. That if that had happened and he'd still been in the bed, he could have just stayed under it. Excuse me. So here we go. I've sort of called this chapter the Hunter-Seeker chapter. Excuse me a wee second. I'm just going to get some of this from my throat. That's disgusting. Oh, very lemony. Makes my face twist. And it's also gone cold. So I'll try and drink the other half very quickly. The Hunter-Seeker has some, if we go to the back of the book, we have the terminology of the Imperium. And it tells us that it's a ravening sliver of a suspensor buoyed metal, guided as a weapon by a nearby control console. Excuse me. And that it's a common assassination device. Dear, oh dear. And we're told that this is a tiny hunter-seeker. It's no more than 50 centimeters long. And that every child of royal blood learned about it. And I think there's a couple of interesting points here. First of all, every child of royal blood learns about this ravening sliver, if you like, this hunter-seeker. I suppose that what's quite interesting from being a bit of a pedant, if you like, is that the terminology of the Imperium, it uses a very particular phrase. It's a ravening sliver of a suspensor buoyed metal, guided as a weapon by a nearby control console. So ravening sliver. But if we look in the text here, where are we? So that was from the terminology of the Imperium. In the text, we have, from behind the headboard slipped a tiny hunter-seeker no more than 5 centimeters long. Paul recognized it at once, a common assassination weapon that every child of royal blood learned about at an early age. It was a ravening sliver of metal guided by some nearby hand and eye. It could burrow into moving flesh and chew its way up nerve channels to the nearest vital organ. As much as, excuse me, that's our omniscient narrator giving us Paul's thoughts on the thing, if you like, and the language is exactly the same. So if you just wanted to be a bit pedantic about it, we've kind of asked the question, who is our narrator? And in terms of the propaganda presented by Princess Irulan consistently throughout the book, the terminology of the Imperium is part of this book, and the narrator, the narrator has given himself away here. We know it's Frank Herbert, but if there is a point to the third person omniscient narrator, then whoever it is the same person who's written the terminology of the Imperium, if you see what I mean, because the use of terms is too incredibly similar. They're identical. So ravening is a very particular word. Like ravenous, hunting for food because you're so hungry, that kind of thing. And sliver. So both of those words together, of all of the many, many, many thousands and thousands of words in the universe, those two being in the exact same combination within one's one book, and I suppose an appendix, and the other is actually the narrator. I'd just cheekily say that they're the same person. It's a thing that we do, I suppose, with old books, is kind of identifying particular writers through their words. And for example, much of the Old Testament has I don't know now, is it 3 or 4 different writers these days? But you I can identify them by different terms that they use, if you see what I mean. It's quite an interesting thing if you want to look into it, isn't it? Who wrote the Old Testament? As in, taking a serious look at who are the different authors based on their style, how they write, and the words that they use. It's fascinating. I've got lots of wee things that I say, loads of sort of verbal mannerisms myself that give me away, if you like, But there we go. What does this tell us as well? I mean, every child of royal blood learns about this. Dear, oh dear, what a terrible thing to teach, the royal kids, that here comes the sliver in the night, a silent piece of metal that's going to come and kill you. It says a lot about the society, I suppose. I've just put very dangerous feudal society. And it seems quite a vicious little thing. It can burrow into moving flesh, it chew its way up nerve channels to the nearest vital organ. So I suppose we have a kind of tension in the room at the minute between movement and stillness, I suppose. Let's have a wee look. I think this is a great as I said, it's quite a small chapter. I think the tension in it's very, very good. And we kind of get the built up with sounds, movement, silence, lack of movement, this kind of thing. And it's almost a back and forth. And it's brought to an end pretty quickly, and almost, I suppose, coincidentally. So, as Paul observes this thing moving about the room, we get to learn a little bit about it. And I suppose we get another lesson, but it's from Paul's knowledge. In other words, this is something that every child of royal blood should know about. So we're going to get to know, from Paul's point of view, what exactly they do know about it. So it's a hunter seeker. It's a little sliver of metal. It's about 5 centimeters long, and it's guided as a weapon by somebody with a control console who's nearby. It can burrow into moving flesh, chew its way up nerve channels into the nearest vital organ. And we're told, so here we go, this is the knowledge. It has a compressed suspensor field that distorts the vision of its transmitter's eye. So dim light, in other words, means that the operator needs motion. So there's a problem with it there. And this is Paul working the problem, if you see what I mean. Shields can slow them down. And if a shield can actually give you time to destroy the thing before it does any harm. And I suppose all of these lessons, this is the full lesson we're getting, I suppose, because a lot of this is irrelevant to Paul, isn't it? We're then told, oh, las guns can knock them down. A little bit about las guns, I suppose. But las guns can be expensive and cranky on maintenance. And of course, if a laser beam hits what's called a hot shield, if you like, an active shield, then we get a nuclear explosion, don't we? So they're not the best of things. And of course, as much as we're told all of that, hey, shields are great, lasers are brilliant, all of that is absolutely useless to Paul, who is not wearing a shield and has no laser gun. And we get a little statement about the Atreides, I think, which is an interesting one, and says a lot. The Atreides rely on their body shields and their wits. And if that's the case, Paul's not bothered to put his shield on. And I've just made a wee note here that, of course, reliance equals dependency. And as we go along here, of course, the Atreides, their dependency on shields is going to be part of their downfall, isn't it? So we got an awful lot of that. I suppose that was really for our benefit, wasn't it? Again, it's the narrator sort of relating the lesson of that young royals should learn about hunter-seekers. And I suppose that's, you must, I don't know, can you feel sorry for young royals? Not generally, I don't think. So, yeah, Paul's got no gun, no shield, and it's down to, it's not, as much as the Atreides rely on their shields and their wits, all he's got is his wits. Let's see. China said, just catch up. China said, animals and plants from Earth successfully transplanted to Arrakis. The question unanswered yet is, can humans and people successfully transplant too? Well, that's, I suppose, in that sense, they can be transplanted to Arrakis, but they're stuck there, and aren't they? And that's all to do with the nature of space. But there's another thing, as I often wonder about, is it would be nice, and I'm kind of curious I've always been curious to see about these 30 pages of notes that Frank has left behind. Is there? I suppose we get a little bit of a description of Arrakis prior to the worms, but I'd love a detailed description by Frank of what Arrakis was like. We kind of understand how the worms operate anyway, so we know what happened to the planet. That kind of makes me think a wee bit like that. Wonder did it happen to Earth? There's Brad. Hi, Brad. Well, was this the first time hunter was used as a prefix? It's been used in sci-fi since. The most famous is in the Terminator movies. The T-1000 was originally to be designated HK-1000 Hunter Killer. It was only changed later in production. I don't know. I'd argue hunter and seeker almost mean the same thing. I don't know. You've got your Orion being the great hunter before God. Was that Nimrod, isn't it? Kind of things like that. I don't know, as in I suppose as you mean, Brad, a specific piece of sci-fi tech or terminology, the hunter killer, the hunter seeker, this kind of thing. Terminators. And terminus is an interesting word. It was only changed in late production. I think there's quite an interesting. If you're into your Terminator franchise, not I have no idea what's happened to it nowadays, but the first film I think is really good. But that's if you what's it called now? If you want to check out the original Terminator, it's a Outer Limits episode called The Soldier. It's written by Harlan Ellison. And there's a lawsuit involved with Harlan Ellison and James Cameron. And yeah, it's a rip-off. And who's the actor in it? I think it's Michael Ansara. Is that Michael Ansara? Is that it? Who's really good. I think he played Killer Kane and Technomage on Babylon. He's in all sorts of things on Babylon 5. Yeah, there's Moo the Dog, Zero. How far are we into Dune? Moo the Dog, we're on chapter 9. And I know that Dune doesn't have any chapters, chapter numbers, so I'll just let you know. What we're doing is working with epigraph, so each chapter begins with an epigraph. On this version of the book here, we're on page 70, page 71, 72. As the epigraph that begins, many have marked the speed with which Muad'Dib learned the necessities of Arrakis. So that's the way we're working at the minute. We're just on going through chapter 9. We just got diverted a wee bit there. So we're going 2 of these a week. Moo the Dog, Thursdays and Sundays. So this is chapter 9. We'll be doing chapter 10 on Thursday at 9 o'clock. So we're doing 2 a week. And yeah, so we're not too far into the book, and we've actually only just arrived on Arrakis. And so this is the first attempt on Paul's life. I'd actually missed out something actually I meant to say. Let me see. Just going back to the Hunter Seeker. I have a little note in my margin talking about Lord Raglan. And just to let you know, so there's we have particular associations of Paul Atreides with Greek mythology. And one of the books that Frank Herbert used to build up his knowledge, there we go, and his ideas, Frank Herbert's ideas on mythology, which line up with kind of Jungian ideas and Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces. This is the book here. It's Lord Raglan's The Hero, and it's a very influential book on, I suppose, the psychological school of mythology, if you like. But it has an influence, I think, obviously. You can kind of do a sort of Raglan to Jung to Campbell, if you like. You can follow the way that the work has developed through these 3 men. So particularly, there's the 22 steps of ritual steps that a hero goes through, and this pattern, the main character that Raglan uses to base this ritualistic pattern on is Oedipus, and the only character that scores 22 out of all of these historical and mythological beings that he talks about is Oedipus. And we have a very, very close association with Paul Atreides. So part of that ritualistic pattern that the hero must go through. Bear with me if I can find it here in the book. And he uses lots. Now his work is generally discredited, by the way. If you've been on the channel for a wee bit of time, folks, you'll have heard me talk that The Hero is a great book, and just because it's discredited, don't consider it crap or not worthy of a read. If you see it, it's absolutely worthy of a read. Here we go. So generally at this point, the hero goes through. I think Paul Atreides scores 19, which is incredibly high on this, and it's just in terms of lining him up with the Oedipus character. Of course, with the Atreides myth as well, and there's also some of the Minoan and Theban myths. But step 1, the hero's mother's a royal virgin. I said he doesn't fit into all of these. Step 2, his father's a king and a royalty. often a near relative of his mother, but the circumstances of conception are unusual. He is also reputed to be the son of a god. Six, it's number six, a birth. Now, the difference is it's not at birth here, but at birth, an attempt is made, usually by his father or his maternal grandfather, to kill him. So that's where we're at. Just to let you know that this is kind of fulfilling one of Raglan's steps of the ritualistic hero, which is, as I said, it's like, here, cracking wee book, really good. You could read through it in about a day, and you could probably pick up loads of copies of it. It was quite influential in its time. And I think it's an excellent read if you're into the subject of studying heroes. Then it has its place. I think a very worthy place, actually, but not everything. He's not bang on about a lot of stuff, I think. There we go. Hunter would be the human controlling it. Seeking is the mini worm chomping wire, searching the room. Moo the dog. Okay, yeah, no worries, Moo. Peter said, they call me the seeker. I've been searching low. I've been searching high. Very good. Yeah, I don't know. Hunter Seeker. It sounds cool, doesn't it? I suppose, and it does what it says on the tin. But it does, yeah. As Chai pointed out, it has an element. It has a human to control it, and unfortunately, it's got, because of the field, it's got bad eyesight. Excuse me. Right, I managed to drink all my lemons. Let me see if I got multiple fluids up here tonight. We've got funky lemon stuff. That's cold coffee. Ugh. I'm going to switch to blackcurrant. There we go. Got to maintain those precious fluids, folks, you know. So yeah, what a vicious little monster of a creature, of a machine this is. That was a bit of a way of talking about it. But yeah, we get a little bit of knowledge about it. And so a lot of this knowledge is kind of useless. We're informed as readers, but it's not much good to Paul. And as I said, he's got no lasguns, he's got no shields. He holds himself with a catatonic immobility, and he only has his wits. And I've made one. Oh goodness, we're on the hero tonight, aren't we, folks? Well, this is the hero's test, I suppose. And it's another test that Paul's got to go through. And I've just made a wee note. In this case, we have the shield, the weapon, and the armor fails the hero. And this is a common thing. So I think I've talked briefly about this before, but often with a lot of these heroes, when it comes to the matter of the crux of dealing with the monster, the creature, whatever it is that they have to deal with, the archetypal dragon or worm, then usually there's a weapon or some kind of boon involved, and it often fails the hero. The sword breaks. Good examples of this are Beowulf, I think, and I think Theseus is another. There's a lot of these heroes. At the end of the day, they might have magical weapons. I think Perseus is involved in this in some way as well. Things fail them, break, and at the end of the day, they just get in and slug it out. And if you see what I mean. But Beowulf's really good for that, I think, and I'm pretty certain it happens with Gilgamesh as well, if I can remember. But I'd say the best example of that, and I must dig out my copy of Beowulf. Possibly. Hang on a second. I'll have a wee quick look here, because I can never remember the chap's name. There's a good translation of Beowulf by Seamus Heaney, if anybody's interested. Geats, Jutes. Let's see. There's old wee laugh. Let's see. Oh, I'll tell you what. Let me. I don't think it's going to give it there in the synopsis, but it's basically the kind of dodgy guy in the court gives Beowulf a kind of here's a magical sword of my father's, if you like to, no hard feelings for me being a bit of a dick to you, that kind of thing. And I think this sword fails Beowulf at the key critical moment, and it's down to strength as usual with him. Beowulf and Gilgamesh are quite similar, I think. But there we go. I just wanted to point out the shield, this magical, wow, what a great shield this thing is. It fails the hero in this case because he simply isn't wearing it. mm. But yeah, it is a motif of heroes, I think. It'd be interesting to look at that. I suppose I know the broken sword is a thing that works in different mythological cultures, if you like. Always interesting to see how it works around the world. So we get this movement again. Where are we? And I think my throat's getting a wee bit better. The hunter seeker lifted up half a meter. It rippled through the slatted light, back and forth, quartering the room. Now, this kind of effect, this was all set up for us in the previous chapter, these slats. And you imagine the kind of, the something straight flying across these slats and rippling almost like a serpent, I thought. Snake-like, And I said this kind of scene's been set up well for us. And we get Paul's thoughts here. I've got to grab it, basically. And again, a little bit of info. The suspensor field makes it slippery on the bottom, but he must grip it tightly with his hand. We get this framed with another bit of movement. Previously, it went up half a meter. It's quartering the room. It's kind of doing a search pattern. This comes back down half a meter. Quarters to the left, circles back around the bed. Faint humming. And of course, again, Paul's thoughts intruding on this, who's operating this thing? It has to be someone near. I could shout for Yui, but it would take him the instant the door opened. And we're thinking, okay. So we think he pretty much is certain that Yui is next door. And whether Yui is or not, we're not too sure. It's simply based on Paul's abilities when he was listening. He could shout for Yui. If Yui comes in, it's going to kill him. And at this point, we've got a fair amount of tension here. And of course, what happens is the hall door behind Paul creaked. A rap sounded there, and the door opens. And as much as he's thinking, I wonder, can I call for help for Yui? The door actually starts to open, and we're wondering, is this Yui coming in? Perseus used the shield to distract Medusa. Here, Paul is without the shield, but Mapes is the distraction. Oh, with Perseus, it's not Medusa that I'm thinking about, is it? But maybe I think it's something else. But yeah, the shield. That's right. I love the Perseus and Medusa myth. I think it's really interesting. And in terms of, we were talking about the bull's head the other day. We were talking the Minotaur's name. Not that anybody's ever. I think nobody ever goes, what's the name of the Minotaur? Minotaur means bull of Minos. The Minotaur's name is Asterion. And Medusa is one of three sisters. I think the myths to do with her are particularly interesting. I've actually considered writing a one-act play about Medusa. I think there's three monsters, if you like, within Greek mythology that are very hard done by. And certainly Medusa's fate is horrible. And you have nothing but sympathy for Medusa. Medusa means guardian, and she's one of three Gorgons. Peter, I think I talked about my guitar. Let's see. Medusa means guardian. This one here, Peter, is called Uriel, Uriali, and means far-ranging. And the bass there is her other sister called Stethano, which means forceful. But in terms of what the myth's really about, I think that's very interesting. And I think it's to do with the migrations of religions, etc., etc. But yeah, but certainly Medusa is not in any sense of the word. She becomes a monster, but she's certainly not a bad person. You have nothing but pity for her, I suppose. That's it. And I feel quite a lot of pity for the Minotaur as well. So it's I'm trying to think of who the third creature was. Of course, Pegasus, there's a bit of bother with Pegasus actually in lining up those myths. Different heroes ride Pegasus, don't they? But yeah, sorry, off I go thinking about Greek mythology again. But yes, and so we get this tension's been building. It's building very quickly. And Paul's thoughts. I wonder if I call for it, suddenly the door is open. Ooh, is that wishful thinking? Is Dr. Yui coming in? But it will kill that person. And he's just thought that, and here's it happening. So he has to act. And I think we get these sounds breaking up. The door creaks, rap sounded there, and the door opens. That tension. I think at this point, Paul thinks that Yui's coming through, but off he goes. Paul's right hand shot out and down, gripping the deadly thing. Paul's right hand. Here we go again. Just imagery and so on. Yeah. So it hummed and it twisted. It's the language here. It twisted violently in his hand. Muscles locked in desperation. Violent turn and thrust. And eventually he's managed to get the thing and slams its nose against the door plate. Let me see. Is it with a good? He slammed the thing's nose against the metal door plate. He felt the crunch of it as the nose eye, I think that's a great word, nose eye smashed and the seeker went dead in his hand. And of course, still he held it. Just to be certain, caution, always the attribute with Paul Atreides at this point. Always caution. It's dead. I don't care. I'm hanging on to it. I don't trust it. And of course, his eyes come up to meet the open stare of total blue from the shadowed mapes. It wasn't Yui coming into the room. And I think this is quite interesting, this little bit here. Let's just have a wee look. Still, he held it to be certain. Paul's eyes came up, met the open stare of total blue from the shadowed mapes. Your father has sent me for you, she said. There are men in the hall to escort you. Paul nodded, his eyes and awareness focusing on this odd woman in a sack-like dress of bondsman brown. She was looking now at the thing clutched in his hand. So here's Mapes meeting Paul. This thing has happened. You know, this is bang, clone action. Oh, what the heck? And ever businesslike, I think. Mapes is just, your father has sent me to tell you there's some guys in the hall. Straight to the point. Not phased that much by this, I think. And I always think it's funny. It's almost as much as it's a little bit of excitement here, it's a wee bit anticlimactic, and I think it's kind of funny in a little way. But I think this is a particularly good interaction with Paul and Mates, and I think you get to see a little bit of Paul's, his ducal sense, if you like, and you get to see that other side of him, I suppose. And we have to remember that the epigraph at the start of this chapter is about the humanity of Muad'Dib. We had little kids' nursery rhymes going kill, kill, kill you, this kind of thing, which seems a bit strange. But this one's all about his humanity. And he was going to save Yui, I think, which is interesting. But it wasn't him; it was Mapes. So it suggests that Yui's not in the room next door, I suppose. And Paul nods. Paul nodded, his eyes and awareness focusing on this odd woman in a sack-like dress of bondsman. She was looking now at the thing clutched in his hand. I've heard of such like, she said. It would have killed me, not so? He had to swallow before he could speak. I was its target. Of course, Mapes, but it was coming for me. Mapes' language is quite straightforward and pragmatic here, isn't it? And it'll take a little shift in a wee second because you were moving. And he wondered, who is this creature? Which I think is we talked about this the other day, the use of the words, And creature, I think is an interesting one. I think whenever one of the books that's very interesting about that is Frankenstein, of the modern Prometheus. Of course, Victor Frankenstein is the doctor. That's who the title is about. It's about him. But is it the monster is often, it's either the monster or the creature. I think, and creature again, something created. It's an odd. Who is this person? I suppose is what I would think. I wouldn't. Who is this creature? Who is this, or even who is this woman? That's what I would be thinking. So who is this creature? And he's maybe a wee bit adrenalized. I don't know, but pretty much he saved her life. And ever pragmatic. We have a little bit of a banter that goes back and forth. I actually put a wee note that there's when he swallowed before he could speak. I was its target. I think it's kind of. I thought that the pause there's almost it's hard for him to say. It's a moment of realization. Someone's trying to kill him specifically, and I suppose all his education, what every little, every royal child knows about hunter seekers, probably enough to give them nightmares. But he's finally encountered one, and of course Paul has survived this test of the hero, if you like. And it's a potentially fatal test, and he has come through it. And not only that, he's helped Mapes come through it, I suppose. And there's a level of pragmatism between the two of them that I think is interesting, that they kind of almost speak the same lingo, if you know what I mean. It was coming for me. That's because you were moving, then you saved my life. I saved both our lives, It's okay. He's not trying to be, yeah, I did, didn't I? There's a pragmatism to the two, the way they talk here. And it seems like, and again, this is reciprocated with quite an insightful question, or statement, sorry. Seems like you could have let it have me and made your own escape, she said. And she is correct. I mean, whenever someone came in the room, for Paul to survive, all he has to do is not move. That person's going to die. He acts before he sees Mapes, I suppose. So the assumption is that he acts to save Yui. And it says a lot about Paul's character, I suppose. He is prepared to risk himself for other people. Of course, who are you? I do like these kind of sort of interactions. The shadowed Mapes, housekeeper. And how did you know where to find me? So your mother told me. And I met her and again, we have this little bit here. And as we read this, some of this is going to be sort of reiterated for us a little bit later. How did you know where to find me? Your mother told her, and she met her at the stairs to the weirding room down the hall. Excuse me. So the weirding room, and I think as we'll find out about this room in the next chapter, I suppose. And as much as it's a conservatory, isn't it? And it's I suppose what's the way to describe it? There's a particular way of describing it. If I can remember correctly, we'll not worry about it too much. But it's a certain type of conservatory, isn't it? And so this, how it's described by Mapes, I suppose, and others here, the weirding room. And I think that's fascinating. It's very interesting. Whenever I start my videos, we have the Weird of the Red Russ productions on it, and that's a wee in joke, of course, just to the Weird of the White Wolf. And of course, we might know the Weird sisters from Macbeth aren't witches; they're the Weird sisters. So weird in this sense means fate, or destiny, if you like, but really fate and the fates, etc. And we have a little bit of that within this story, I suppose. The fates in Greek mythology are Clotho, Atropos, and Lachesis. And again, you'll see, I think I've used some I think it's a rather good pre-Raphaelite painting of them in one of the videos. I suppose one determines the length of thread of a person's, or one spins the thread of a person's life. One determines how long it should be, and the other one cuts it, as in for death, if you like. And that's who the fates are. So to call this room a weirding room, in terms of the language here. It's suggestive that something to do with fate or destiny, and not that it's a weird, strange, odd, eldritch, fey, that kind of thing. A lot of good synonyms there. So I think this last little bit, it's not a particularly long chapter, this one, folks. But we get this little bit here, I think, is quite insightful. Your mother told me I met her at the stairs to the waiting room down the hall. She pointed to her right. Your father's men are still waiting. And it's this line I think is funny. Those will be Howit's men, he thought. We must find the operator of this thing. And of course, Paul becomes quite businesslike himself here, and we get to see him act as a duke's son. Gives orders: go to the father's men, spread out, search the house, seal off the house, seal off the gardens, search for this guy. And he's a pretty businesslike about it. And he makes an interesting sort of little point here. The operator's sure to be a stranger amongst us. And of course, we have a wee bit of sense of irony there, I suppose. But he wanders about Mapes here and asks, could it be this creature? And at this point, he works it out. He knows that it can't be her. That while she was coming into the room, the device was still under the control of its operator. So it can't be Mapes. Which is kind of a good thing, I suppose, in that sense, from his point of view. He kind of makes Mapes a trustworthy person just by a process of elimination. And what comes next is really interesting. I think it's quite... we get a lot about, I suppose, Fremen ideas here. And we get a little bit of knowledge. And of course, Paul is rewarded, if you like, in terms of what the hero does. The hero has just had to overcome, a deadly threat here. And traditionally, as the hero does overcome a threat, he should be rewarded in some way. And his reward here is knowledge, though it's not full knowledge, but it's the same knowledge that we have, that there's a traitor. And even so, he's not going to get it all. But I think it's quite interesting. The one thing, just before we go any further, I suppose, was that your father's men, said Mapes, he identifies that as Howit's men. And I've just put, whoops, Howit's security is really bad. And as readers, I don't know, I know we joke about this, folks, but consistently, Howit's security is not worth a damn. And anybody can see that. Surely we can all see that at this point. That just in terms of the last week or two, that this geezer's not doing a good job at all. All these men are milling around outside. The housekeeper's better informed than they are. It's interesting. But yeah, how its security is a thing that should strike terror into the people that it's protecting. I suppose. As opposed to the emperor and so on. So we get this nice little exchange between Mapes and Paul, and uses an interesting term for him, and I think it's a good term. Let me just see if I can find it here. 34. Before I do your bidding, manling, Mapes said, I must cleanse the way between us. So she calls him a manling. It's not calling him a child. She's not being that condescending, but she's not quite calling him a man either. But he has saved her life. But it's just an interesting little word, I suppose. It's maybe a little colloquialism or mannerism. But I must cleanse the way between us. There's a water burden on me, and I think this is an interesting line from Mapes that I'm not sure I care to support. I think I'm not too sure I want to owe you anything, but we Fremen must pay our debts. And we learn a little bit about the Fremen here, I suppose. She must pay our debts, be they black debts or white debts. I'm assuming good ones or bad ones, but they'll pay up regardless. They'll honor what they owe. So we're told that it is known to us that there's a traitor amongst you, who they don't know, but they're absolutely certain of it, and maybe that the traitor is the person that controlled this device. So this is Paul's reward from Mapes. A little bit of knowledge that we already have, that he doesn't, I suppose. And there's probably a suspicion within House Atreides, and we're going to get to that. But that's one that's been sown by the Harkonnens. But this is his reward for facing this perilous monster of the Hunter Seeker. Yeah, I think that the Hunter Seeker is often just described as a thing, isn't it? Gripping down the deadly thing. I think they continually refer to it as just a thing, but it's certainly the thing that tests the hero here. And for Paul, I suppose this is almost another Gom Jabbar, isn't it? It's he passes this test and emerges through the other side, and it's not just that. I suppose if we can consider it as a test about, are you human or are you an animal? This kind of idea, and I think that the term animal often means beastly. In this case, he could be beastly if he let Mapes die. So in this sense, I think because of how Paul's behaved in this crux of a situation, that he's emerged out of it different again. But there is something of his character here that we should admire. And regardless of who he thought it was, he put his own life at risk. He didn't have to touch this thing. He's grabbed it and wielded it and put it out and saved the day in a way. And then shown us that this guy can run a real household. He knows how to. Seems that he knows how to run security better than Thufir does. And again, Paul has been poured into an Aquarian age just now. Yes, another transition, isn't it? I was listening to some old 60s stuff there on I do like playing a lot of that kind of music, Peter. My favorite kind of music is arguably 60s psychedelic rock, that kind of thing, and 70s and so on. And I was sitting strumming along to White Rabbit the other day. Excellent, just really enjoying it. I hadn't played it in ages. And somebody put quite a psychedelic video for it up on YouTube. I was enjoying it very much. But yeah, I used to describe myself back in the 90s as a bit of a techno hippie, if you like. And that was in the 90s, goodness gracious. Yeah, so this information, Paul absorbs this in silence. A traitor, And what I think is quite interesting is the way that Mapes piles out of the room at this point. And if we remember how we've talked a bit about how different people leave and come into rooms and so on. This is another example of a door opening and how Mapes has come through this door. We haven't really seen her enter the room, but she's come in and with her little rap at the start, I suppose. But here, how she leaves, reminiscent of how Jessica left, the sense of urgency. Mapes whirls away back to the entry. Let me see, where are we? 35. Before he could speak, the odd woman whirled away and ran back toward the entry. And I think this is really interesting. He thought to call her back, but there was an air about her that told him she would resent it. She'd told him what she knew, and now she was going to do his bidding. The house would be swarming with Howitt's men in a minute. And I just thought that's quite smart of Paul. That shows a level of astuteness, a level of understanding of Mapes and what Mapes has just done. And that he, as much as he doesn't have all the answers, he doesn't call her back. He has an understanding here that this woman has given me everything that I could possibly want and more. She's given me all the information that she has because she feels that she owes me a life debt. And she's run off to do exactly what I've asked her to do. Why she, I'm not going to, don't call her back. It's, and she would resent it. I think is interesting, the practicality of the woman bringing her back when she's already going about a job. I think it shows insight in Paul's character. And as much as they've had such a little connection here, again, I'll keep sort of saying this. It's the minor, the characters and minor characters, I suppose, like Mapes and Danny Villeneuve's Dune, we lose so much from them. I suppose they're really really important interactions. I think, and I think Mapes is a little absolute cracking character. Um, it reminds me of one of my aunts, actually. It really does. Just a wee whirlwind, a wee woman, just running about, very practical, sorting the stuff out. No, no nonsense. Um, so yeah, I like Mapes a lot. I think very interesting. Hard, just barely there, if you know what I mean. These characters, but very, very full, I suppose. And we do learn a little bit about her from the Fremen, or sorry, about the Fremen. And of course, we Fremen pay our debts. Mapes is a Fremen, so this is the first real Fremen that Paul has met in the flesh, and knows for certain, that this isn't a person of is it Pan or Grab? This is actually a Fremen. And I think, yeah, very interesting. She's representative of her people. And her vitality, etc. And kind of almost it's almost one of the last things, I suppose, that we find out. Paul's mind runs through these kind of key points. The weirding room, what's that? We Fremen. Mapes is a Fremen. And we're told Paul does this. He paused for a mnemonic blink, stored the pattern of her face in his memory. Prudent, wrinkled features, darkly browned, blue on blue eyes, no white. Attached the label, the shadowed Mapes. And I think that's really, really good. Paul, I suppose it's some sort of mnemonic blink, some kind of memory device that he has for remembering details. And it sounds like a mentat function, doesn't it? Paul's little, the description seems very, I don't know, computerized, if you see what I mean, mechanical. He paused for the mnemonic blink that would store the pattern of her face in his memory. Memory storage, this kind of thing, if you see what I mean. But we've had that description of Mapes before, and we're told such vitality in these people. Prune, wrinkled features, darkly brown, blue on blue eyes, no whites, and he attaches the label, the shadowed Mapes. And I think it's, we should kind of attach the label as well. We should note this woman. And she is representative of the Fremen, I think. And of course, we have this, again, this just final framing of the action here, setting up the next bit. But it's very kind of action hero, isn't it? It's that moment where, a man's got to do what a man's got to do, kind of thing from the old westerns, if you see what I mean. Still gripping the shattered seeker, Paul turned back into his room, scooped up his shield belt from the bed with his left hand. He swung it around his waist and buckled it as he ran back out down the hall to the left. She said his mother was someplace down here. Stairs. Weirding room. So it's that kind of buckle on, ready for adventure, dash off, and to be continued next week. And we've reached the end of the chapter. So it just ends with really storing this sense of Mapes into his head, and sort of putting his shield on, I suppose, not learning that lesson that he shouldn't have had his shield belt off. Maybe that he should sleep with it, I suppose. Is that the idea? And I think one last sort of thing about the weirding room, etc., is he doesn't run off to see his father. At this point, his mother, someplace down the stairs, and a weirding room. That's where he heads. I just thought heads to the mother as opposed to the father. Interesting. And off he goes to the weirding room, and we'll be picking up that one. This is the way I'm doing my wee work. There we go. To the weirding room, chapter 10 next time. So there you go. Let's see what I'll catch up with some of your comments, folks. That's probably one of the quickest ones we've done. It is a short chapter. I have to say I'm quite relieved from my throat. But if you've got any comments or questions, fire away, and I'll catch up with what you have been saying. Let's see, Peter saying again, Paul has been poured into the Aquarian age just now. She's like the old woman in the shoe. God, I haven't heard that one in ages. That's a long time. The old woman in the shoe. Cynthia says, interesting that Paul's memory technique focuses on visual information, maps his face, her features, and labels her name, but not necessarily on what she did or said about the Fremen. I suppose, yeah, it is interesting how you remember things, possibly the association. I kind of have a thing that I use for my memory, I suppose. And I don't know how to describe it. I suppose it's like a round room in my mind. It's full of out shelves, cupboards and drawers, and it's kind of split, kind of that way. And in the middle of middle of mine, it's an imaginary construct in my head, I suppose. But in the middle is a drawer that says classical studies, and it's split in two, and it has Greek and Rome and everything else comes out of it. But I mentally file things in that room if I want to remember them, and I have an appalling memory for names. Sadly, well, just sort of everyday people's names, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I've a very good memory, I think. But I have to work at it, and it's kind of fun. Yeah, but you can only store so much in your head. I think that's the problem. Tommy Shelby. Goodness, that's what do you call it? Peaky Blinders, isn't it? I don't know what to think about that show. Sometimes I have to say, I know it's coming near an end. But I suppose there's a level of violence in it, but there is a kind of real life association with it that carries off over here, and so we get we've been getting people singing songs from that show, I suppose, about the place now and then, if you know what I mean, but in a bit of a negative conflict, you know. Simonides, Colleges and Campbell's is saying his use of mnemonic is interesting because of the association with breath. Well, we have. I thought it was a very kind of computerized type thing, and I'd agree with you, Cynthia. It's not. Or sorry, who was it said? Oh no, it was Cynthia. Yeah, sorry. It's a visual thing, isn't it? I don't know how I do it really. It's to me, it's just a sense of a thing. It depends on what you're trying to remember. Yeah, and I think, well, he must think that Mapes is important enough. It's an important moment for him, isn't it? I suppose in terms of his life, it's a bit like maybe somebody taking a Polaroid, on holiday. This is the first time that Paul's met an actual Fremen, and I suppose that this chapter, if we think about it, it represents a transition for Paul in I don't know, theory into practicality, I suppose, theory into real life. He's learned all of these things about how to survive, how to be a ducal son, all the dangers of the universe, etc., how to watch out for traps, all of this kind of thing, how to buy, how to know someone's station. And here is an actual attempt made on his life using something that's considered a common assassination tool in the universe that every child of a royal household should know about. So it's kind of it's a bit, I don't know, it's a moment of testing, and he's come through it on the other side, Numa. So yeah, so there we go. Simonides, do you want to elaborate a bit? Colleges, it's good to see you, by the way. Thanks for joining us. Simonides. There we go. Always have to go which one. It's that kind of thing. Let's see. Greek lyric poet. Change that. Got to tell you something I haven't read. I don't think I've read anything by him. Biographical themes. Must have a nosy. Siege of it. Somebody's about some particulars. Yeah. Simonides of Chaos. Greek lyric poet. Okay, let's have a look. Hang on. The scholars of Hellenistic Alexandria included in the canonical list of the 9 lyric poets. Let's see who we got. Alcman of Sparta, Sappho of Lesbos, Alcaeus of Mytilene, Anacreon of Teos, Stesichorus of Metaurus, Ibycus of Rhegium, Simonides of Chaos, Bacchylides of Chaos, and Pindar of Thebes. I've read 2 out of that list there. There you go. I have to pick up on my lyric poets. Not that I've read much lyric poetry. I like pastoral poetry. It's quite fun. Method of Loki. Oh. That sounds interesting. Yeah. Our Greek guys are always quite interesting, I have to say. They're a quirky bunch. Who was the last sort of poet that I was reading out of my Greek catalogue would have been, oh goodness, who would it have been? Hang on a second, I'll tell you. My brain is, I think it must be all the cough medicine, folks. Let me see. I was reading some pastoral poets last time, which is quite interesting. Let me pastoral. Oh, honestly. Theocritus, that's it. There you go. So that's the last bit of writing by a Greek that I hadn't read much of. The last 2 stuff I read from the classical world, I think I read Theocritus's Idylls a wee while back, and God, I think I actually read some Roman stuff a wee while back. I think I was reading Marcus Aurelius. We're talking about a year or so ago, and I think I've managed to stick mainly to myths and epics in the meantime, and a lot more science fiction, obviously, because of doing this. But there we go. Method of Loki. Is Loki as in mathematics? You're talking about colleges. Simone. It sounds an awful lot of it. I'll have to have a look at them when we're not online. Oh, there's not a lot here. Oh, right. Gotcha. Here we go. So, right. Is that Doris Lessing we're talking about? Oh, God, no. Let's see. What does it say here? Just on Wikipedia, folks. Referred to Simonides as the Greek Voltaire. His general renown owes much to traditional accounts of his colourful life and one of the wisest of men. As a greedy miser, as an inventor of a system of mnemonics, that's what we're talking about, and also the inventor of some letters of the Greek alphabet. Such accounts include fanciful elements, yet he had a real influence on the sophistic enlightenment of the classical era. His famous poet rests largely on his ability to present basic human situations with affecting simplicity. In the words of the Roman rhetorician Quintilian, Simonides has a simple style, but he can be commended for the aptness of his language and for a certain charm. His chief merit, however, lies in the power to excite pity, so much so that some prefer him in this respect to all other writers in the genre. Popularly associated with the epitaphs commemorating fallen warriors, for example, the Lacedaemonians at the Battle of Thermopylae. Oh, okay. Well, that's quite a famous one, by the way, folks. So that one is one I do know. Tell them in Lacedaemon passerby that here, obedient to their word, we lie. Is it often here by Spartan law we die? Isn't it that kind of thing? That's the commemoration of the 300 at Thermopylae. There's lots of different translations of that. Thank you very much, colleges. I wasn't too sure what you were talking about there, just to get the context. But yes, Simonides and mnemonic techniques. Groovy. Yeah, he's worth having a look at, isn't he? My classics library, I have to say, is pretty small these days. But I must show it to you sometime, actually. I've just in terms of not all the books. I'm sure they'd probably bore the crap out of some of you guys, but I have a couple of books that are like, wow, and they don't make books like that anymore. I've got a copy of what's called the Cambridge Ancient History, Volume 4. Which is the Persians and onwards, if you like, from sort of going into the Greek, the Persian Wars, that kind of thing. It has big old fashioned book, and you open up and it folds out like all these different alphabets of the times and different areas and all these different absolutely exquisite books. They don't make them like that anymore, I have to say. But yeah, so skip to middle career test. What is the spelling in the book of the term? June says mnemonic. Mnemonics, that's a different thing. All right. I don't know. Let me just check, actually. Spelling mnemonic. Mnemonic. Yeah, same as it. So let's see. Oh, what's her name? Let me tell you. Hang on. All my spelling today. There she is. Mnemosony. That's. I'm trying to. I'm having a. There you go. And it's. If you want to check her out in Greek mythology, have a look at mnemosony. It's memory. That's where we get the word, isn't it? There's so much from the class, all the stuff that appears in our world, I think, But there we go, folks. So I think it's a very tight little chapter. It's a moment of high peril, if you like, for Paul. And as I said, if we're ever curious about, I've done a step-by-step comparison in the episode that we've done on Lord Raglan. So if anybody's interested to see how Paul Atreides fulfills the different steps of the hero according to Lord Raglan's list, as I said, there's 22. Paul fits into 19 of them. I've actually got it open here in front of me. So what Raglan does then, he then goes through the different heroes and shows how they fit into these kind of this ritualistic pattern and what they score. So Oedipus is 20, full marks 22. I think Theseus is 20. There's Romulus with 18, Heracles 17, Perseus 18, Jason 15, Bellerophon 16, Pelops 13. He says at least 13, which is interesting. Asclepios, Dionysus, Apollo, Zeus, Joseph, Moses, Elijah, Watu Gunung. Also we got Ni Kang, Sigurd or Siegfried, Lou Logos, if I'm pronouncing that right. That's probably very bad. It's Welsh. Arthur, Robin Hood, etc. So he runs a whole lot. He has heroes from different cultures, etc. And he runs those lists. But if you want to have a look at my video on Lord Raglan's The Hero, I do the how Paul fits into his steps, and it's another one of these kind of systems that's designed to. It's a system designed to look at heroes, I suppose, which is kind of the part of the problem. And if you're aware of, let me see, hang on, I'll just get it over here. There we go. Oh, there's another Dune book hiding over there. Chaos Theory, Herbert's Foundation in Dune. Dominic Crumble. Joseph Campbell's The Hero of A Thousand Faces is a very important book, I suppose, in terms of bad mythography. But this is the book that, and you'll see on my cover, by the way, there's Luke Skywalker. And this book's popularity is, again, because of its association with George Lucas. And a few writers were into it at the time. But in terms of what Herbert's study of heroes, it's kind of, there's a couple of other books, but it's Raglan, Carl Jung, and Campbell. And as I said, there's a logical progression to it. Campbell also has his patterns, if you like, within the adventure of the hero and the monomyth system that he has. But it is a system as well. And I was just trying to see if I could find the illustration. It's quite a famous one. Um, and I suppose, a kind of universal system whenever you're looking at something like mythology, etc. The real problem for these guys, there we go. That's, I don't know if you can see that. This is there we go. That's the Joseph Campbell, and that's the cycle of the hero, if you like, the whole thing there. And it's based on Raglan's, I think, to a degree, and the work of Young. And I'd also argue that some of Young's work is, if you put the dates down, I'd say some of Young's work rips off Samuel Butler's as well, particularly his ideas of the collective unconscious. So in terms of how Herbert approaches myth, um, I would argue that it's from a flawed approach, because that's from a flawed approach. And sadly, so is this. And it's kind of not how we do our business, if you like. Um, and it's lazy thinking, I think, to say, oh, all myths are the same, that there's a simple pattern, they all follow it. And interestingly enough, that's systemic thinking. And it's one of the things that Herbert's actually wants to warn you about is the dangers of systemic thinking. So there we go. But I'll tell you what, they're great books to read if you're interested in the whole idea of heroes. There are other books that would give you much better knowledge in addition to this. But I suppose it's studying steps, if you like. Just because people don't get something right, doesn't mean that the effort's not worth it. And there's a lot in here that's really interesting. And if you study mythography, that kind of thing, people's mistakes teach you as much about myths as what they get right. If you see what I mean, it's just about your ability to interpret it. But the other one that goes, I'd argue that another book that goes really well with this, and I know that Herbert's aware of it, but he doesn't, I think, include it really. But is Thomas Carlyle's on heroes, hero worship, and the heroic in history. And again, I have these quite lovely little old, that's a handy volume classics, and this one's Thinker's Library. Lovely wee sort of red hardback books from. I just love books like this; they're gorgeous. And I've had these ever since I was a kid because I was into heroes, I suppose. Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, Young lived from 1875 to 1861. When was Butler's ideas of the collective unconscious are inside Erewhon, which is published in 1872. Peter. You see, so sometimes it's very much like there are a lot of connections here, and I can see connections between Butler, Young to Herbert, that kind of thing, from Lord Raglan to Young to Herbert. It's very obvious, and especially some of the ideas that Herbert talks about within the Jungian mandalas. If you get a copy, I think mine's downstairs actually. And I'll try and bring it up here for the next time so that we can show you this. As if you have a look at Young's, I think it's is it volume 3 on the archetypes of the collective unconscious. It's kind of the same with Freud, by the way. These people aren't mythographers. They're not, and they're playing in a sandpit that they don't really know how to play in. If you see what I mean, and by bringing this whole psychological approach to it. It is one way of looking at things, but it is often badly flawed. And as I said, tend to work, if you want to study myth, I suppose, literary evidence, archaeological evidence, this kind of thing is where you begin. And Raglan sort of thought that it's all contained in drama, really, in ritual, and that's about it. And that's what the hero is. The hero is man appearing as divinity and divinity as man, this kind of thing. But again, if you have a look at my videos, you'll see that there's so much more to it, and all the evidence that I've put in the videos is all the real stuff. And if you realize that you limited yourself to studying heroes by just looking at what these people tell you to, then you'd learn very, very little. And in fact, there's a whole wealth of stuff out there to find out about these people. It's great. It's okay. Okay. Yeah, it is. It's food for thought. There's a lot of good ideas out there. Not everybody often admits where they get their ideas from, but there's no way on this earth that the collective unconscious idea can be Carl Jung's. None. uh, unless he had a time machine. It's as simple as that. It's not his. And it's the same with there's ideas that are in Dune that people think, Frank Herbert. Wow, no, we go to Butler. We have five points of absolute identity between Samuel Butler's Erewhon and Dune, and I dare say there are probably a few more, to be honest. Species level systemic thinking is unavoidable, even if circumstances influence this. We are evolved, after all, from common ancestors. Herbert seems to think it's possible, hence mentats, etc. The idea of a collective unconscious, I suppose, race, it depends on how you look at it. And it was one of the, again, what's popular at the time with Herbert and so on. I think it seems to be a popular idea again. I might be wrong, but I seem to see things people talking about, race consciousness and stuff like this. And in terms of, I suppose, passing on your genes, that kind of thing. But I'm yet to be convinced by it. But I think Butler's treatment of the whole idea is very funny. I have to say, and again, if we look at it once we get into Herbert's Dune, it starts. There's just too many loopholes about how does it make things don't make sense. And but I suppose it's an idea to explore, really. And guys, I'll say this: I've got about all the videos on the station. The one to kind of look at that is to do with Butler. I've got a couple of I think 4 or 5 on him, really building up and showing his influence on Dune. But there's stuff in there about George Bernard Shaw, etc., contemporaries at the time, talking about these ideas of collective unconsciousness, and it's a conversation that's going around in I don't know if I could call it Victorian society or else late Victorian or early 20th century British society. And I think we've even given a few wee quotes in there, so it's well worth having a look into. I know, but I can't remember when Butler was born, by the way, Peter. But I know I think he died in 1902. I'm pretty sure because his last book was published posthumously in 1903, and it was The Way of All Flesh, I believe. And it's arguably his other really famous book. Because it's a damning indictment of Victorian family life. It's considered really iconoclastic. Put the nail in the coffin of Victorian family life, if you like. And it's interesting that it was published posthumously, I suppose. But Butler's pretty popular character in Victorian society. I'm not too sure what to think about him. He's a bit can be a bit aggressive, I think, in some ways, but he doesn't realize it himself. But he certainly didn't. He certainly put a bit of the frighteners into Darwin. Darwin was scared of him. And of course, the thing about there's Butler did a work on. It's to do with a book about the Iliad being written by a woman, which was an idea that he put forward at the time. And again, there's a few years back, I think somebody else has put this idea forward again, but it's not a new one at all. And I think somebody was promoting a new book about this idea up at the Seamus Heaney Centre, I think. And I'd almost considered going up to ask them if they were aware that Samuel Butler had written a book on this over 100 years ago. It's one of those things. But there we go. I'd agree, colleges and cannibals, that systemic thinking to a degree is unavoidable, but it's understanding that you can change how you think, I suppose. Myself and my wife talk a lot about this in terms of particularly her work and my work. But certainly my wife works in social work, for example, and I suppose running people through a system that you have to understand you're looking at a person. and not just a set of data, this kind of thing. And it's one of those fall downs that government often has, I think, that as we use systems, a system is, I suppose, a way of human thinking, I think. But yeah, they're everywhere, and you can make anything into a system. It is Herbert's thoughts on them, on such things are interesting, and I yeah. Oddly enough, that's not a bad book to have a wee look at it, but it's only really one chapter. That's Chaos Theory, Asimov's Foundations and Robots, and Herbert's Dune, the fractal aesthetics of epic science fiction. But systemic thinking, the dangers of that, is one of Herbert's main themes, I think. But it's fundamentally linked into the ecology. There we go. But yeah, folks, it's been fun tonight, I have to say. People are systemic. That is why medicine works. Well, yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? The systems work. So goodness sake, I have a master's degree in computing and information systems. So you're you're talking to a systems guy, colleges and carnivals, and I love systems, and I think that way as well. But I have to pull the computer scientist head off sometimes and think more like a philosopher, I suppose. That's kind of that way of thinking. And just because something is one thing doesn't mean it can't be another. I think I've got quite a curious way of thinking about these things, I suppose. But you're absolutely right. And our bodies are made up of multiple systems. Yeah, they're very interesting things, I have to say. Well, listen, folks, it's just coming up to 11, and yeah, it's been great tonight. Thank you very much for your patience over the last week or so with my throat. I've managed to keep the book clubs going, but I had to drop off a couple of my science fiction nights, and it was really just my throat was absolutely shredded the other night, and otherwise, as long as I can talk, pretty much I'll have a go. So I do apologize. My wife would often tell me that I shouldn't say I'll see you on Friday, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm the sort of person that would try and do one of these broadcasts even if my legs were hanging off. But the only thing that, I'm no good when I can't talk, sadly. So thank you very much for your patience with me over the last week, and apologies. Actually, loads to talk about for Science Fiction Friday and Saturday and so on. And we'll maybe have a natter about it the next time. But in the meantime, if any of you haven't seen it, by the way, Netflix has a rather good new science fiction film from, is it Pierre Junot, French director. Oh, what was it called? Is it Big Bot or something? Or was it Big Bit? I can't remember. Let me see. Big Bug. Big Bug. Watched it last night with my funny French science fiction comedy. Very good. I enjoyed it. Maybe not to everybody's taste. Depends on if you like French cinema or not. But I thought it was a cracker, and it was something new, and it was something science fictiony. So if anybody has Netflix and you want to check it out, we can maybe have a bit of a chat on our next Science Fiction Friday. And in the meantime, me and my cough medicine will sign off and spare my throat for the next one. Thanks very much for joining me, everybody, and thank you very much for your contributions as always. And we'll see you for our next chapter on Thursday at 9 o'clock GMT. And as always, look after yourselves no matter where you are, and take care of yourselves. Thanks very much for joining me, and all the very best. Good night now. And bye.